Well, course 162 is all about SQL Server 2008 reporting services. This is a pretty packed course, so let me just kind of go right into it here. This is an 8-chapter course. This is at a beginner to intermediate level. That's kind of the target market for this particular course. We do have some spikes to some intermediate advanced or some even advanced topics, particularly when we're talking about things like pivot tables against cubes and analysis services material. So we do have some of that, but primarily it's targeted for the beginning intermediate person. Okay? So this is a really good course if you already know how to write queries and you want to learn how to create reports with reporting services, or you want to learn how to manage a reporting services server, be an administrator or a sysadmin, right? Kind of like a DBA for the report server. Now, the videos that's in this, just real quick, you can take the chapters, you could watch the videos, you could do these in any order. I kind of design it to where you can parachute in at any point in the course, and provided that you have the knowledge of the previous chapters, you're going to be okay. Because I'll kind of try to walk you through everything as we're going through it there. So here's the chapters. You might want to pause the video and kind of take a look at these if you want. What I'm about to do is just step through each of the 8 chapters and kind of give you a bullet point list of the primary things that we cover in each. So if you want to pause it, you can, and you can look at it. All right, I'm going. So here, let's take a look first at Chapter 1, an introduction to reporting services. Now, one of the things that we're going to have to discuss, and we're going to discuss this in a little more detail at the end of this video, is what are the various versions of SQL Server reporting services. It's actually trickier than it might have otherwise been. I'll kind of explain that at the end. Now, we're also going to talk about the differences between SQL Server 2005's reporting services and SQL Server 2008 reporting services. And also, you see that R2 thing? We're going to have to talk about that as well. Now, I use a particular course databases here that we're going to cover a little bit later in the chapter. So we'll talk about what those are. And then there are video exercises within the course, and we're going to talk about how those work. And in Chapter 1, we have 4 different exercises. Now, Chapter 2 is for our system administrators. Now, later on in Chapter 1, I'm going to identify what I call a track. So our track, you see this is kind of the first time that we've used that word here. The track is simply a path that you would take for a particular goal. You are a system administrator, for example. You are the DBA for your systems. Maybe you manage your Windows servers and the SQL servers and the reporting server. I'm calling you a system administrator. So Chapter 2 is specifically targeted for you. It's all about installing and configuring reporting services. Okay? So we'll go through the installation. We'll walk through also the configuration. There's going to be several different types of installation, so we're going to have to cover the 3 different types. We'll also talk about how to upgrade from SQL Server 2005 reporting services. And there will be some common installation problems, so we'll have to talk about those. I'll go ahead and I'll tell you, just kind of a little heads up, if you're coming from prior versions, so like SQL 2000 or 2005, there's a lot fewer of those installation and configuration problems in 2008 than we've ever had. It's a lot more plug and play. Now, for number 3, we're going to have to talk about reporting services security. And again, we're still on that system administrators track. So we'll talk about the default security, how to customize security, how to secure the server, the things that we need people to be able to see. We'll grant them access to that, but we want to kind of hide things from other people. Now, Chapter 4 is when we start getting into creating reports. So this is sort of our introduction to reporting services reporting. And as such, this belongs on what we call the report author track. Okay, so system administrators, Chapters 2 and 3. Chapter 4 begins where we sit for the report author. And like I said, it's totally cool for you to jump in at various points during the course. Okay, so you could go from chapter 1 to chapter 4. We'll talk about that later in the chapter here. So we got to talk about the different types of reports that reporting services can work with. And we're going to actually be creating some fairly complex reports. We're going to add images, we're going to add text and graphics and HTML, and we're even going to do standardization through templates so that if we have multiple people on our team, they'll be able to also take advantage of this fancy little template that we're building our reports from. Now, chapter 5 is kind of building on chapter 4. Chapter 4 was, hey, here's all the different report types. Here's how to make them look pretty. Chapter 5 is, okay, now let's make them more dynamic. Let's make them more usable by the user. So these are on the report author track again, and we're going to talk about report parameters and parameterization. We're going to talk about things like calendar drop downs and just trying to make this a more usable environment for our users. Now, chapter 6, still in report authorship mode, we're going to go one step further. Okay, so we talked in chapter 4, types of reports. Chapter 5, dynamic reports, making them more usable, more user-friendly, trying to make it to where we don't have to make 500 reports. We can just make 100 reports and give people the ability to customize them as they need to. Chapter 6 is, okay, let's push the envelope. Let's talk about tablets. Let's talk about pivot tables, pivot charts. Let's talk about working with analysis services. So still very much on the report author track. So we're going to have to talk a little bit in detail about the kind of the advanced types of reports and how to choose the right report given the set of data that you're working with. And so we'll have to go through creating what will ultimately be some pretty complex reports. Now, chapter 7, okay, now we're into a different set. Now we're into working with report models and the report builder. We're talking about ad hoc reporting. Now, this may be new to you, and that's okay. I'm not going to go into too much detail right yet. We'll get there. But this is now the report author and our third and other final track, the report administrator. So I'm going to break down what all the different tracks mean in a future video, like 2 or 3 videos from now. So we'll see those here. But this is understanding the ad hoc reporting and creating report models and working with one of my favorites, the report builder in SQL Server 2008. Now, our final chapter, chapter 8, is actually putting the reports out there for the rest of the world. This may be, for some of you, already done, depending on how you've done what your reports already were. So some of you will watch this set, some of you won't. It technically fits all tracks because even the sysadmins need to understand a little bit about the deployment. So we'll talk about working with local servers, deploying to an intranet server. So we'll play a little bit with that one. Now, let's kind of wind down in this video. We've got a couple more slides here. There are 2 related courses that I think you might want to take a look at if you're not already or haven't even already taken those. The first one is the DBA for SQL Server 2008. This is obviously for those of you who are system admins. If you need to install SQL Server, configure it, you want to understand security and backups, that's my course. I did that one. It's a very, very comprehensive course, quite long. And the course that I just finished, actually before I started recording this one, I just finished it like 3 days ago, and so now I'm right into this one, is probably my favorite course that I had done up until then. It is a query writing course. So if you've ever struggled with what the difference is between a left join and a right join, or an inner join versus an outer join, or when to use exists versus a simple subquery, or what a subquery even is, that's going to be a really good course to help you master those fundamentals of SQL. Now, one little bitty caveat here to this course. I want you to make sure you're in the right place. I want you to make sure this is the right course for you, okay? Because it is actually very tricky. Unfortunately, I wish it was a little bit easier, but just look. This is a SQL Server 2008 reporting services course. Now, that may seem silly. I know. Why is he even talking about this? Okay. When I say that, what you've got to understand is that there are two different yet similar versions of reporting services under the SQL Server 2008 moniker. Okay. So let's kind of go through these. So here's what this course is about. Okay, course 162 is about what's on this page. It's about SQL Server 2008 reporting services. It was released in 2008. The report designer uses the Visual Studio 2008 IDE. The report builder is 2.0. You see the little logo there. Now, here's the weird one. Here's the one that can kind of trip you up a little bit here. You see here this little R2. Release to, refresh to, whatever you want to consider that there. This is not the same as SQL Server 2008 reporting services. This is actually very different from the front end, meaning that what it looks like. Okay? The back end, very similar. The front end, how you interface with it, how you create reports and manage reports, going to be very different. Okay. So you can see down here the little R2 emblem right there. You see the R2 appended there. What I need you to do is make sure that you're on SQL Server 2008. Okay. Now, that being said, and let me do this. We will cover the new features in several videos here a little bit later. I do have to say, it's not wrong to watch this course even if you have R2. I am of the personal opinion that it is easier to go up than it is to go down when you're dealing with learning, with software. What I mean by that is if I already know SQL Server 2005, it's fairly easy for me to go up to SQL Server 2008. I have a little bit of history with the product. I have probably a very wide knowledge of the product after I've already done both of them now, as opposed to learning SQL Server 2008 and then going backwards and trying to learn SQL Server 2005. Maybe it's a mental thing, I don't know, but I find it more difficult to go backwards. So it's totally fine even if your organization is using R2 to learn SQL Server 2008 version of reporting services. Who knows, you may be working on one of those in a future time and it could come in handy because they are very different. I will also tell you that the biggest difference between SQL 2008 and SQL 2008 R2 is in the authoring tools. So what you actually use to create the reports. Okay? R2 uses Visual Studio 2010. SQL Server 2008 uses Visual Studio 2008. Two completely different environments. Okay? R2 uses Report Builder 3.0, okay, which is a far superior interface to Report Builder 2.0. Okay? But that doesn't mean Report Builder 2.0 isn't a good interface. Okay? It's just doesn't have as many features as the next version of it. It's kind of, I think, the way software typically works. I think this, kind of a rule of thumb, if you learn how to do it in SQL Server 2008, and then you move to R2, it's just going to be easier to accomplish what you need in R2. I mean, that is, as reporting services has matured, that has been one of the consistent themes. Each version gets easier and more usable. And I don't think that's any different between 2008 R and 2008 R2, which I just am going to call R2, just easier. All right, so I tell you what, we're going to stop here, and I'm going to pick it up in the next video, and let's talk about who should take this course and why that's important. So I'll see you in the next video.